I've owned Midnight Bloom Flower Shop in Lahore for nearly 15 years now. It sits on a narrow street corner where the old part of the city meets the new. The shop itself is nothing special, just a small space with walls lined with buckets of flowers, the air always heavy with their mixed scents. My father ran this shop before me, and his father before him. One tradition has always been kept in our family business. We stay open until midnight, every night, no exceptions. As a child, I would ask my father, "Why must we stay open so late? No one buys flowers at midnight." He would only smile and say, "Some traditions must be kept, even if we don't understand them." When the shop became mine after my father's passing in 1992, I kept the tradition going, though I never understood it. Most nights I would sit alone, arranging tomorrow's displays or doing paperwork while the city quieted outside. Rarely did anyone come in after 10 p.m. It was a Tuesday night in the summer of 1997. The air conditioning was broken again, and the heat was making the flowers wilt faster than usual. I had the front door propped open, hoping for any breeze to come through. At 11:55 p.m., I was counting the till, ready to lock up in 5 minutes, when the bell above the door jingled. I looked up to see a tall man enter. He wore a crisp white shalwar kameez that seemed to glow slightly in the dim light of my shop. His face was handsome but odd somehow, his features too perfect, too symmetrical. "As-salam alaikum," he said, his voice smooth like honey. "I need flowers for a special occasion." "Wa alaikum salam," I replied automatically. "I was about to close, but I can help you quickly. What's the occasion?" The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "A remembrance, something that smells sweet but lasts a long time." I nodded and moved toward the jasmine section. "Perhaps jasmine? The scent is beautiful and—" "No," he interrupted. "Those won't do. I need something older." I frowned, confused. "Older flowers would be dying, sir." He laughed then, a sound like wind chimes but slightly off-key. "I mean flowers of an older variety, something your grandfather might have sold." A chill ran down my spine despite the heat. My grandfather had died before I was born, but my father had told stories of rare flowers he used to grow in the back room, varieties that had since disappeared from Pakistan. "I'm sorry, we don't have anything like that anymore," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The man tilted his head slightly, at an angle that seemed just wrong enough to notice. "Are you sure? I was told this shop always has what I need. That's why it stays open until midnight, isn't it?" My mouth went dry. "Who told you that?" "Your grandfather, of course." The room seemed to grow colder. "My grandfather died in 1961. The man smiled again, wider this time, showing teeth that looked too white, too pointed. "Did he? Time moves differently for some of us." My hands began to shake. "Sir, I really need to close now." He ignored me and walked around the shop, running his fingers over the flower petals. I noticed then that his shadow on the wall didn't quite match his movements. It seemed to lag behind by half a second. "Your grandfather made a promise, you know," he said casually. "That's why this shop stays open until midnight. He promised one of us could always find sanctuary here in the last minutes of the day." "One of us?" I managed to ask. He turned to look at me, and for a brief moment, I swear his eyes flashed like cat's eyes in the dark. "The hidden ones. Those who walk between your world and others. My father's warnings suddenly made sense. Never close before midnight. Never break the chain. Never question who comes in during the final hour." "You're a djinn," I whispered. He bowed slightly. "And you are a keeper of promises. Your grandfather gave us sanctuary when others would hunt us. We merely come to remember that kindness." I swallowed hard. "And if I had closed early tonight?" His smile faded. "Promises broken have consequences. Your family has been protected for 3 generations because of your grandfather's word." The clock on the wall chimed midnight. The man looked up at it and nodded. "Perfect timing as always," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that looked like a dried flower I'd never seen before. Dark red with black edges, giving off a faint scent of cinnamon and something else I couldn't place. He placed it on the counter. "For your troubles. Plant this in your garden. It will protect your home." Before I could respond, he walked toward the door. As he reached the threshold, he turned back to me. "Your grandfather was wise to make friends with us instead of enemies. Keep his promise, flower seller. Some traditions exist for reasons beyond understanding." Then he was gone. I rushed to the door but saw only an empty street. The next morning, I might have convinced myself it was all a dream, except for the strange flower still sitting on my counter. I planted it as instructed. It's been 20 years since that night. My flower shop still stays open until midnight. Sometimes they come in, these two perfect people with shadows that move wrong. They never buy anything, just nod respectfully and leave something unusual behind. Seeds, strange coins, or small carved figures. I understand now why my father and grandfather kept our shop open so late. Some traditions aren't just traditions, they're promises. And some promises, especially those made to beings from the hidden world, must never be broken. The strange flower from that night still grows in my garden. It blooms only at midnight, and no pest ever touches it. And in all these years, no harm has ever come to me or my family. Some might call me crazy, but I know what I saw. And I'll keep the shop open until midnight until I pass it to my son, along with the story of why some traditions must be kept, even if we don't understand them at first.